r/pettyrevenge stepdad cut my pay, so I quit at family reunion. The smell of barbecue smoke and my own sweat mixed in a humid August air as I overheard the words that made my blood run cold. "Oh, I'm paying him $12 an hour," my stepdad Rick laughed, flipping burgers on the grill while Uncle Dave nodded approvingly. "But between you and me, I'm only actually giving him 6. Kid needs to learn that life isn't fair, and hard work builds character. I'm doing him a favor, really." I froze behind the corner of my aunt's house, dirty work clothes still clinging to my skin after another brutal 10-hour day of hauling mulch and trimming hedges. The family reunion was in full swing, and here I was, 17 and exhausted, discovering that the man my mom married 2 years ago had been stealing half my wages all summer long. "Smart thinking," Uncle Dave chuckled. "These kids today expect everything handed to them. You're teaching him valuable lessons about the real world." My hands clenched into fists. Valuable lessons? I'd been breaking my back for 3 months, working 6 days a week in the blazing sun, thinking I was earning $12 an hour toward my college fund. I'd calculated it obsessively. By summer's end, I'd have nearly $4,000 saved up. Enough for my first semester's books and maybe even a decent laptop for classes. Instead, Rick had been pocketing $2,000 of MY money while patting himself on the back for being such a wise father figure. "The boy's got potential," Rick continued, his voice carrying that fake pride he always used when talking about me to relatives. "Just needs to understand that nothing comes easy. His mom thinks I'm too hard on him, but someone's got to prepare him for the real world." I wanted to storm around that corner and confront him right there, but something held me back. Maybe it was the way my cousin Sarah looked at me with pity from across the yard. She'd obviously heard everything too. Or maybe it was watching my grandmother beam with pride as she listened to Rick's wisdom about raising teenagers. See, everyone loved Rick at these family gatherings. He was the guy who stepped up when my mom was struggling as a single parent. The reliable man who took on a difficult teenager and whipped him into shape. My mom's family treated him like some kind of hero for marrying into our mess and bringing stability. But standing there, eavesdropping on his casual admission of theft, I realized Rick saw me as nothing more than cheap labor he could manipulate. While I'd been grateful for the summer job and proud of my work ethic, he'd been playing games with my future. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Come eat. Grandma made your favorite potato salad." I stared at the message, then at the scene in front of me. Rick was now holding court with 3 uncles, probably spinning more stories about his generous mentorship. Aunt Linda was setting out desserts on the picnic table where my little cousins played. Grandpa was dozing in his lawn chair, and Mom was laughing with her sisters by the pool. This perfect family gathering, where Rick basked in everyone's admiration while bragging about stealing from me. That's when I decided I wasn't going to slink away quietly. I wasn't going to wait until we got home to have some private conversation where he could gaslight me or make excuses. If Rick wanted to use this family reunion to showcase what a great role model he was, then this family reunion was exactly where I'd show everyone who he really was. I pulled out my phone and started recording. My hands shook as I held up my phone, trying to get a clear angle on Rick's conversation. The recording app was running, but my stepdad had moved away from the grill and was now walking toward the house with Uncle Dave. I'd missed my chance to get his confession on video. "Stupid," I muttered under my breath, shoving the phone back in my pocket. But maybe this was better. Maybe confronting him publicly without evidence would force him to either admit what he'd done or lie in front of everyone. Either way, his perfect reputation would take a hit. "There you are." Mom's voice made me jump. She appeared around the corner, her face flushed from laughing with her sisters. "I've been looking everywhere for you. Why haven't you changed clothes yet? You smell like a lawnmower." I looked down at my grass-stained work shirt and dirt-caked jeans. Even at the family reunion, I was still wearing the uniform of Rick's cheap labor. I got here late. Rick had me finish the Henderson job before I could leave. On a Saturday. Mom frowned. "Honey, you've been working so hard this summer. You deserve a break." The irony was suffocating. Here was my mom, worried about me working too hard, while her husband was literally stealing half my pay. Did she know? The thought hit me like ice water. What if Mom was in on it? "How much is Rick paying me again?" I asked carefully, watching her face. "12 an hour, right? That's what you both told me." Her expression was genuinely confused. "Why? Is everything okay with the job?" Relief flooded through me. Mom didn't know. Which meant when I exposed Rick, she'd be just as shocked as everyone else. Maybe more so. "Everything's fine," I lied. "I'm just keeping track of my hours." "Well, go get cleaned up. Grandma's been asking about your college plans, and you know how she gets when she doesn't get to interrogate her grandchildren properly." As Mom headed back toward the party, I caught sight of Rick through the kitchen window. He was inside now, grabbing beers from the fridge and chatting with my teenage cousin Jake. Probably filling his head with more wisdom about hard work and life lessons. My anger flared again. Rick wasn't just stealing from me, he was building his entire reputation as a family man on the lie that he was some kind of generous mentor. Everyone thought he was doing me this huge favor by giving me summer work. They praised him for teaching me responsibility and work ethic. But $12 an hour wasn't generous, it was barely above minimum wage for backbreaking labor in 90-degree heat. And he wasn't even paying me that much. I walked toward the back door, my plan forming. I'd wait for the right moment, when everyone was gathered together. Maybe during dessert, when Grandma always made her little speeches about how grateful she was for family. That's when I'd stand up and thank Rick publicly for all his generosity this summer. I'd mention how much I appreciated earning $12 an hour, and ask him to tell everyone exactly how much money I'd made. Put him on the spot. Make him either confess or lie to his wife and her entire family. But as I reached for the door handle, I heard Rick's voice again from inside the kitchen. "Jake, you should come work for me next summer when you turn 16. I'll pay you $15 an hour, more than I'm giving your cousin, but don't tell him that. Kid's not ready for real money yet." My blood turned to liquid fire. $15 an hour. For my younger cousin. While I got 6. This wasn't about teaching me life lessons. This was about Rick thinking he could exploit me because I was his stepson, not real family. Now I wasn't just going to embarrass him. I was going to destroy him. I stood frozen outside the kitchen door, Rick's words echoing in my head. $15 an hour for Jake. More than he was supposedly paying me, and definitely more than the $6 I was actually getting. The betrayal cut deeper now. This wasn't some misguided lesson about work ethic. This was pure exploitation disguised as family values. Really? 15. Jake's excited voice drifted through the screen door. That's awesome. I've been looking for a summer job. Just keep it between us for now, Rick said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Your cousin's doing fine with his current arrangement. Different kids, different approaches, you know. I wanted to burst through that door and scream the truth, but something made me pause. Through the kitchen window, I could see Mom approaching with Aunt Linda and my grandmother. Perfect. An audience was gathering. Rick's been such a godsend with our boy, I heard Grandma saying as they entered the kitchen. Working all summer, learning responsibility. You raised him right, honey, she added, and I knew she was talking to Mom. Oh, that's all Rick, Mom replied, her voice warm with affection. I couldn't get him motivated about anything before Rick came along. Now look at him, up at 6 every morning, working harder than most adults. My stomach twisted. Even my own mother was giving Rick credit for my work ethic. Like I'd been some lazy failure before her perfect husband came along to fix me. The kids really stepped up, Rick agreed, and I could practically see him puffing up with false modesty. I started him at a fair wage, $12 an hour, and told him if he proved himself, we'd talk about raises. Character building, you know. $12 an hour. Grandma exclaimed. That's very generous, Rick. When I was his age, I made 50 cents a day picking strawberries. Times are different now, Rick laughed. Kids today need to see real money to stay motivated. But they also need to earn it. I pressed my back against the wall beside the door, my mind racing. The lies were just flowing out of him so easily. Not just lying about my pay, but positioning himself as this generous mentor while literally stealing from me. And everyone was eating it up, praising him for his wisdom and generosity. You know what we should do? Aunt Linda chimed in. We should have him tell everyone about his summer job during dessert. Let him share what he's learned. It might inspire some of the other kids. My heart hammered against my ribs. They wanted me to give some kind of speech about my summer job. In front of everyone. While Rick sat there basking in the credit for my hard work. That's a wonderful idea, Mom agreed. He's been so focused on saving for college. Rick, how much will he have saved by the end of the summer? There was a pause. A long, telling pause that made my palms sweat. Well, after taxes and learning some money management skills. Rick's voice had lost some of its confidence. It's not really about the amount, you know. It's about the experience. But roughly? Grandma pressed. The boy should be proud of what he's accomplished. Another pause. I held my breath. Maybe we should let him share those details himself, Rick said finally. Don't want to spoil his thunder. That's when I realized Rick wasn't just worried about getting caught. He was terrified. He knew exactly how much money he owed me, and he knew that if I did the math in front of everyone, his lies would crumble instantly. The kitchen door opened and Jake bounded out, nearly running into me. Oh, hey, he said loudly. Dude, you're so lucky working for Rick. He just told me. Jake. Rick's sharp voice cut through the air. He'd appeared in the doorway, his face pale when he saw me standing there. Our eyes met. He knew that I knew. And now I knew that he knew I knew. The game had officially begun. The staring contest lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Rick's face went through a whole range of emotions, surprise, panic, calculation, and then something that looked almost like relief. Like he was tired of keeping up the charade. Hey there, kiddo, he said, his voice artificially casual. Just telling Jake about the landscaping business. You know how it is. Jake looked back and forth between us, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding it. Yeah, he was just saying. Jake, why don't you go grab a soda? Rick interrupted smoothly. I need to talk to my stepson for a minute. My cousin shrugged and headed toward the cooler, leaving Rick and me alone on the back porch. Through the kitchen window, I could see Mom, Grandma, and Aunt Linda still chatting, completely oblivious to the standoff happening right outside. So, Rick said quietly, crossing his arms. How much did you hear? Which part? I kept my voice level despite my heart hammering. The part where you told Uncle Dave you're stealing half my wages? Or the part where you just offered my 15-year-old cousin more money than you've ever actually paid me? Rick glanced toward the kitchen, making sure we weren't being overheard. Look, I can explain. Explain what? That you've been lying to everyone for 3 months. That while my mom brags about how generous you are, you're literally stealing from her son. I'm not stealing anything, Rick hissed, stepping closer. You're living in my house, eating my food, using my truck to get to work sites. Consider it room and board. The audacity nearly knocked me over. Room and board. It's my mom's house too. And I've been packing my own lunches and paying for my own work boots with money I didn't even know I wasn't getting. Keep your voice down, Rick warned, but I could see sweat beading on his forehead. We can work this out. Maybe I was being a little conservative with your pay structure. But you're 17, for Christ's sake. What do you need all that money for anyway? College. The word came out louder than I intended. Remember college? The thing you keep telling everyone I'm saving for. Through the window, I saw Mom glance toward us with a curious expression. Rick noticed too and forced a big fake smile, waving at her before turning back to me. Okay, look, he said, his tone shifting to something that probably worked on my mom when he was in trouble. I made some mistakes with the bookkeeping. These things happen in business. How about this, I'll give you a bonus at the end of the summer. An extra, $500. For all your hard work. $500. Out of the $2,000 he'd stolen from me. That's not going to work, Rick. $1,000 then. Come on, be reasonable here. You're still making good money for a kid your age. That's when it hit me, he still didn't get it. He thought this was a negotiation. That I was just angling for more money and would eventually take whatever scraps he offered to keep the peace. He had no idea that I was about to blow up his entire reputation in front of the people whose opinion he cared about most. You know what? I said, stepping back toward the kitchen door. Let's go inside. I think this is exactly the kind of thing we should discuss as a family. The color drained from Rick's face. Wait, hold on. Don't be hasty here. Your mother doesn't need to be dragged into a business disagreement between us men. Oh, I think she does. I reached for the door handle. Especially since everyone's so excited to hear about my summer job during dessert. I'd hate to disappoint them. Kid, please. The desperation in his voice was almost pathetic. Let's just. I opened the door and walked into the kitchen, leaving Rick scrambling to follow. The real show was about to begin. The kitchen felt like a pressure cooker when I walked in. Mom, Grandma, and Aunt Linda were still clustered around the counter, but now Uncle Dave had joined them, along with my cousin Sarah who was helping arrange dessert plates. Rick stumbled in behind me, practically radiating panic. There's our working man. Uncle Dave boomed, clapping me on the shoulder. Rick was just telling me how proud he is of your work ethic this summer. Was he? I glanced back at Rick, whose smile looked like it was carved from stone. That's funny, because we were just discussing my wages. Mom looked up from the pie she was cutting. Everything okay? You both look a little tense. This was it. The perfect opening. But before I could respond, Rick jumped in with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. Just some shop talk, he said quickly. You know how it is, employee relations can get complicated. Employee relations? The words tasted bitter. Is that what you call it when you tell someone they're making $12 an hour but actually only pay them $6? The kitchen went dead silent. Mom's knife stopped halfway through the apple pie. Grandma's mouth fell open. Even Sarah stopped stacking plates. What? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Rick's face had gone from pale to red. Now hold on, there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I continued, my voice getting stronger. I overheard you bragging to Uncle Dave about how you're teaching me that life isn't fair by keeping half my wages. Your exact words were that you're doing me a favor. Uncle Dave looked like he'd been slapped. Rick, is this true? It's more complicated than, Rick started, but I cut him off. And then, not even an hour later, you offered Jake $15 an hour to work for you next summer. 15. More than you ever actually paid me, and definitely more than you told him I was making. $15. Mom's voice was ice cold now. You offered my nephew more than your own stepson. Jake's older, Rick began desperately. Jake's 15. I shot back. I'm 17 and I've been working for you for 3 months. Aunt Linda stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. Rick, are you saying you've been stealing from this boy all summer? I wouldn't call it stealing, Rick said, but his voice had lost all conviction. There were expenses, overhead costs. What overhead costs? Mom demanded. He uses our truck that we already own. He brings his own lunch. What possible overhead could justify stealing half his wages? That's when Grandma spoke up, her voice carrying the authority of 78 years and zero tolerance for nonsense. Richard, she said, using his full name like he was a child in trouble. Did you or did you not tell this boy he would earn $12 an hour? Rick looked around the kitchen desperately, probably hoping someone would bail him out. But every face stared back at him with disgust and disappointment. I may have simplified the compensation structure for his understanding. That's a yes, Uncle Dave said flatly. Jesus, Rick. The kid's been breaking his back all summer thinking he was earning college money. He has been earning college money. Rick protested. Just, not as much as he calculated. Mom set down the knife with a sharp click. How much money are we talking about here? Exactly how much have you stolen from my son? The question hung in the air like smoke. Rick opened his mouth, closed it, then looked toward the back door like he was considering making a run for it. That's when I realized something beautiful, he was going to have to do the math in front of everyone. The silence stretched on as Rick's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I could practically see him calculating in his head, trying to figure out if there was any way to minimize the damage. But the math was simple, and everyone in that kitchen was smart enough to do it. Well, Grandma's voice could have cut steel. How much? It's not that simple, Rick started, but Mom cut him off. Actually, it is that simple, she said, her teacher voice coming out in full force. You told him $12 an hour. How many hours has he worked, and how much have you paid him? I pulled out my phone, grateful that I'd been obsessively tracking my hours all summer. I can tell you exactly. 62 days, averaging 9 hours a day. That's 558 total hours. Uncle Dave whistled low. Kid, that's over $6,000 at 12 an hour. Minus taxes, Rick said desperately. You have to account for. What taxes? Mom's voice was getting dangerously quiet. You never gave him a W-2. You never set up payroll. You've been paying him cash under the table. Rick's face went ashen. In his panic, he just admitted to tax evasion on top of everything else. So let me get this straight, Aunt Linda said, counting on her fingers. You owe him roughly $6,000, but you've only paid him, what? $3,000. I don't know the exact, Rick mumbled. I do, I said, pulling up my banking app. $2,460. Total. For 3 months of work. The kitchen erupted. $2,000. Mom's voice cracked. You stole $2,000 from my son. Rick, what the hell is wrong with you? Uncle Dave looked like he wanted to punch something. But it was Grandma who delivered the killing blow. Richard, I am ashamed of you. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute judgment. This boy has been working like a man all summer, and you've been treating him like a fool. Mom, please, Rick tried to appeal to her, if you just let me explain. Explain what? How you looked your wife's son in the eye every day knowing you were cheating him. How you sat at our dinner table bragging about teaching him work ethic while stealing his college money. That's when the back door opened and more family members started filtering in, drawn by the raised voices. Grandpa, Aunt Carol, my older cousin Mike, they all crowded into the kitchen just as Rick was falling apart. What's all the shouting about? Grandpa asked, his hearing aid whistling. Rick's been stealing from the boy all summer, Grandma announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. $2,000 worth. The newcomers looked confused, so Uncle Dave quickly filled them in. With each retelling, Rick seemed to shrink smaller and smaller. By the time the whole story was out, he looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Jesus Christ, Rick, Cousin Mike shook his head. The kid's trying to save for college. We all thought you were being so generous giving him work, Aunt Carol added, her voice dripping with disgust. But the worst part was watching my mom's face. The disappointment and betrayal there was devastating, not just because of what Rick had done to me, but because of how it reflected on her judgment. She trusted this man with her son, and he'd proven himself to be a liar and a cheat. Pack your things, she said quietly. Rick's head snapped up. What? You heard me. Pack your things and get out of our house. The family reunion had officially become a family reckoning. The kitchen fell dead silent after Mom's words. Even the kids playing outside seemed to sense something had shifted, their laughter fading into an eerie quiet that made my ears ring. Janet, you don't mean that, Rick said, his voice cracking. We can work this out. It's just a misunderstanding about business practices. A misunderstanding? Mom's laugh was sharp and bitter. You stole from my son for 3 months and bragged about it to my family. What part of that did I misunderstand? It wasn't stealing, Rick insisted, looking around desperately for support that wasn't coming. I was teaching him. You were teaching him that the man his mother married is a liar and a thief, Grandpa interrupted, his weathered hands clenched into fists. Son, I fought in 2 wars, and I've never met a man lower than someone who'd steal from a kid trying to better himself. Rick's face flushed red. You don't understand the situation, old man. Running a business requires tough decisions. Don't you dare call him old man, Mom stepped between them, her voice deadly quiet. And don't you dare try to justify this as business. You stole from a 17-year-old boy who trusted you. That's when Uncle Dave cleared his throat. Rick, I need to ask you something. When you told me about this earlier, you said you were doing the kid a favor. What did you plan to do with that money? The question hit like a sledgehammer. Everyone turned to stare at Rick, waiting for an answer that we all knew would be damning. It was going into a savings account. For his future. What savings account? I demanded. Show me the account. Show me the statements. Rick's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. There is no account, Mom said flatly. You spent it, didn't you? You spent my son's college money. The business has expenses. What expenses? Cousin Mike jumped in. Your equipment is 20 years old, you use the kid's family truck, and you've been getting jobs through word of mouth. What exactly did you spend $2,000 on? Rick's silence was answer enough. But then Aunt Carol spoke up, her voice hesitant. Rick, isn't that about what you spent on that fishing boat last month? My blood turned to ice water. The fishing boat. Rick's pride and joy that he'd been bragging about for weeks. The great deal he'd found on a base boat with all the accessories. You bought a boat with my money. I couldn't keep the disbelief out of my voice. It's not that simple. A boat. Mom's voice cracked with fury. You stole our son's college fund to buy yourself a fishing boat. Now wait just a minute, Rick tried to regain control, but Uncle Dave cut him off. How much did that boat cost, Rick? That's not relevant to. How much? Rick looked trapped, his eyes darting between the faces surrounding him. All the people who had respected him an hour ago now looked at him like something they'd scrape off their shoes. 2,200, he whispered. The kitchen exploded again, but this time it was worse. This wasn't just about business practices or life lessons anymore. This was about a grown man stealing from a teenager to buy himself toys. You son of a bitch, Grandpa growled, starting to stand up from his chair. But before anyone could say anything else, the back door burst open and more family members poured in from outside, including several I hadn't expected to see. Including my biological father. The sight of my biological father stepping through that kitchen door was like getting hit by lightning. Dad, I still called him that despite everything, looked exactly the same as he had 6 months ago when he'd missed my birthday. Tall, stubby beard, work clothes that actually belonged on a construction site instead of being a costume like Rick's landscaping gear. What the hell is going on here? Dad's voice boomed over the chaos. I could hear shouting from the driveway. Mom went rigid beside me. She hadn't invited him, they'd barely spoken since the divorce 3 years ago except when absolutely necessary. But someone had clearly called him, probably Aunt Carol who'd always thought Mom remarried too quickly. Tom, Mom said stiffly. This isn't really your business anymore. Like hell it isn't, Dad shot back, his eyes scanning the room before landing on me. Carol called and said something about college money being stolen. What's going on, kiddo? The irony was suffocating. Here was my real father, the one who'd walked out on us, who forgot birthdays and showed up late to everything, ready to defend me. While my stepdad, the stable father figure everyone praised, had been robbing me blind. Rick's been stealing from him all summer, Grandma announced before anyone could stop her. Bought himself a fishing boat with the boys' college fund. Dad's face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Confusion, understanding, and then a rage so pure it made the kitchen feel 10 degrees colder. You did what? Dad turned on Rick like a predator finding prey. Now hold on, Rick said, backing toward the refrigerator. This is between my stepson and me. You don't have any right. Any right? Dad stepped closer, and I noticed his hands were already clenched into fists. That's my son you stole from. He's my stepson, Rick replied stupidly. I've been raising him for 2 years while you've been. Raising him? Dad's laugh was dangerous. Is that what you call theft these days? The kitchen was getting crowded now, with more relatives pressing in from the living room, drawn by the commotion. But instead of defusing the situation, the audience seemed to be making both men more aggressive. Tom, please, Mom tried to step between them, but Dad wasn't backing down. How much money are we talking about here? Dad demanded. $2,000, I said quietly. Dad went completely still. $2,000. It's not that simple, Rick started his familiar refrain, but Dad cut him off. It's exactly that simple. You stole $2,000 from a 17-year-old kid saving for college. My kid. Your kid that you abandoned, Rick shot back, apparently deciding to go down swinging. Your kid that I've been feeding and housing and teaching responsibility while you've been playing weekend warrior. That's when Dad lunged. Uncle Dave and Cousin Mike caught him before he could reach Rick, but the damage was done. The family reunion had officially become a brawl waiting to happen, and I was standing in the middle watching my two father figures tear each other apart. Stop it. I shouted, my voice cutting through the chaos. Just stop. Everyone froze, turning to look at me. This isn't about either of you, I continued, my voice shaking with adrenaline. This is about me getting my money back and Rick facing consequences for what he did. Mom nodded firmly. The boy's right. Rick, you have exactly 1 hour to figure out how you're going to pay back every penny you stole. But Rick's expression had changed. The panic was gone, replaced by something calculating and mean. Or what? He asked with a cold smile I'd never seen before. That's when I realized Rick wasn't planning to go down quietly. He was planning to take all of us with him. Rick's cold smile spread wider as he looked around the kitchen at all the shocked faces. The cornered animal had suddenly realized he still had claws. You want to know what's really funny about all this? Rick said, his voice taking on a tone I'd never heard before. You're all acting like I'm the villain here, but none of you know the whole story. What story? Mom demanded, but something in her voice had changed. There was a flicker of uncertainty now. Rick straightened up, seeming to gain confidence from whatever card he thought he was about to play. The story about why your precious son really needed this job in the first place. My stomach dropped. Whatever Rick was about to say, I could tell from his expression it was going to hurt. What are you talking about? Dad stepped forward again, but Rick held up a hand. Ask him about the laptop, Rick said simply. The words hit me like a physical blow. Around the kitchen, I could see confusion on everyone's faces, but Mom had gone pale. Rick, don't, she said quietly. Don't what? Don't tell them how their golden boy got suspended from school last spring. Don't mention why he really needed summer work so badly. That's enough, Mom said sharply, but Rick was on a roll now. See, the thing is, Rick continued, addressing the room like he was giving a presentation, our boy here got caught with a laptop that didn't belong to him. School laptop. Took it home and forgot to return it for 3 months. I did forget. I protested, but my voice sounded weak even to me. Sure you did, Rick laughed. That's why you wiped the hard drive and installed your own software on it. Just forgot, right? The kitchen was dead silent now. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, could see the doubt creeping into their expressions. Even Dad looked uncertain. It wasn't like that, I said desperately. I borrowed it for a project and... Borrowed, Rick repeated mockingly. That's a nice word for theft. Runs in the family, apparently. You son of a bitch, Dad snarled, but some of the fight had gone out of him. Rick turned to Mom with fake sympathy. Janet, you never told them about the restitution, did you? About how we had to pay the school $800 to keep him from getting expelled. Mom's silence was damning. $800, Rick announced to the room. Plus he was banned from all extracurricular activities and nearly didn't graduate. But sure, let's all feel sorry for the innocent victim here. Aunt Linda was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Is this true? It's not what it sounds like, I started, but Rick wasn't done. And the best part? The reason he needed this summer job so desperately wasn't just for college. It was because he owes his mother money. Lots of money. For lawyers, for restitution, for all the mess he created with his little theft hobby. It wasn't theft. I shouted, but I could see I was losing the room. The sympathy that had been building for me was evaporating as Rick painted me as a chronic thief. No. Rick pulled out his phone. Should I show them the police report? Because yes, there was a police report. Theft of school property. The only reason he didn't get arrested was because Mommy here begged the principal not to press charges. Mom looked like she wanted to disappear. Around us, the family members who had been ready to lynch Rick 5 minutes ago were now looking at me with suspicion and disappointment. Rick had successfully flipped the script. And the worst part was, some of what he was saying was actually true. The laptop incident. Of course Rick would drag that up now, twisting it into something it wasn't. I could see the doubt spreading across my family's faces like poison, and I knew I had seconds before Rick completely destroyed my credibility. You want to talk about the laptop? I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Fine. Let's talk about it. Rick's smug expression faltered slightly, like he hadn't expected me to fight back. I borrowed a school laptop for a computer science project, I continued, looking directly at Grandma since she was the one person whose opinion could sway everyone else. I was supposed to return it after a week, but my teacher got sick and there was a substitute who didn't know about the project. I kept it an extra 2 months finishing my presentation. You wiped the hard drive, Rick accused. I backed up the school files and installed software I needed for my coding project. Software the school didn't have. When I returned it, I restored everything exactly like it was before. Uncle Dave frowned. Then why did the school call it theft? Because, I said, glaring at Rick, someone convinced them I was trying to steal it. Someone who wanted me to look like a troublemaker so his guidance would seem more necessary. Mom's head snapped up. What? Think about it, I said, the pieces clicking together in my mind. The school was fine with everything until Rick called them. He told them he was concerned about my behavior patterns and suggested they investigate whether I was planning to keep the laptop permanently. Rick's face flushed red. That's not. You wanted me to need you, I continued, understanding flooding through me. You wanted Mom to think I was some delinquent kid who required your firm hand to stay out of trouble. So you turned a simple mistake into a theft case. That's ridiculous, Rick sputtered, but I could see the guilt written all over his face. Dad was staring at Rick with pure hatred now. You set him up. I was protecting the family's reputation, Rick said defensively. The kid was being careless with school property, and I thought. You thought you'd make yourself look like a hero by making him look like a criminal, Mom finished, her voice like ice. But Rick wasn't done playing dirty. Oh please, like you weren't grateful when I stepped in to handle it. Like you weren't relieved when I offered to pay the restitution and set up this summer job to teach him responsibility. That's when it hit me. The final piece of Rick's manipulation. You didn't pay $800, I said slowly. You paid $400. Half. Just like my wages. Rick's face went white. You told the school you were paying $800, I continued, my voice getting stronger, but you only actually paid $400 and let Mom think you'd covered the whole thing. Then you used the summer job to make me pay back the other $400 through stolen wages. Is that true? Grandma demanded. Rick looked around the room desperately, but there was nowhere to run now. The boy needed to learn consequences. Show us the receipt, Dad said grimly. Show us the payment receipt for $800. I don't carry receipts around. Then we'll call the school, Mom said, pulling out her phone. Right now. We'll ask them exactly how much was paid and when. Rick's shoulders sagged in defeat. He'd been caught in one lie too many, and everyone could see it. But instead of admitting defeat, he did something none of us expected. He started laughing. Rick's laughter filled the kitchen like broken glass, high-pitched and unhinged. Everyone took a step back instinctively, like they were watching someone have a complete breakdown in real time. This is perfect, Rick gasped between laughs, wiping tears from his eyes. Absolutely perfect. You want to destroy me? Go ahead. But I'm taking all of you down with me. What are you talking about? Mom demanded, but there was fear in her voice now. Rick pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. I'm talking about the IRS, Janet. You know, those people who get really interested when they find out about unreported income. My blood turned to ice. See, your precious son here. He's been working under the table all summer. No W-2, no tax withholding, no payroll records. Just cash payments that neither of us reported. Rick's smile was venomous. Guess what happens when I submit a 1099 for the full amount I paid him? $6,000 in unreported income. You can't do that, I said, but my voice cracked. Can't I? I've got his signature on work agreements. I've got photos of him on job sites. I've got customer testimonials mentioning him specifically. Rick was scrolling through his phone as he talked. And here's the beautiful part, when the IRS audits him, they're going to audit his whole family. Your mom's teacher salary, your dad's construction income, everyone. Dad lunged forward again, but this time Mom caught his arm. Tom, don't. He's recording this. Sure enough, Rick was holding his phone up, the red recording dot visible on the screen. That's right, Rick said smugly. Evidence of threats, witness tampering, conspiracy to defraud the government. I'm building quite the case here. Uncle Dave stepped forward, his voice deadly calm. Rick, you need to think very carefully about what you're doing right now. What I'm doing is protecting myself from a family of criminals trying to destroy an honest businessman. Rick's voice was getting more manic. You think you can gang up on me? Kick me out? Ruin my reputation? Well, guess what, I know things about all of you. Like what? Aunt Carol challenged, but she sounded nervous. Rick's eyes gleamed. Like how Uncle Dave here has been claiming his son as a dependent for taxes even though Jake's been living with his mother in Arizona all year. Like how Cousin Mike's been running that hobby woodworking business without a license or insurance. Like how Grandpa's been collecting Social Security while still getting paid cash for handyman work. The kitchen went silent except for the sound of Rick's phone still recording. He was systematically threatening everyone who had stood against him, and the worst part was, he seemed to know exactly which buttons to push. You're all so righteous, Rick continued, his voice dripping with contempt. But you're just as dirty as anyone else. The only difference is, I kept my mouth shut about it. Until now. Rick, stop, Mom pleaded. Just stop this. We can work something out. Oh, now you want to work something out. Rick laughed again. When you thought it was just about me stealing from your son, you wanted me gone. But now that your whole family's dirty laundry is on the table, suddenly you're interested in compromise. That's when Grandma spoke up, her voice cutting through Rick's rant like a knife. Richard, you seem to be forgetting something very important. Rick turned to her, his recording phone still raised. What's that, old woman? Grandma smiled sweetly, the same smile she used when she was about to destroy someone at poker night. You've been living in this family for 2 years. Which means we know things about you too. Rick's confident expression flickered for the first time since he'd started his counterattack. And unlike you, Grandma continued pleasantly, we've been keeping very detailed records. Rick's face went from flushed to pale in about 3 seconds. What records? Grandma's sweet smile never wavered as she reached into her purse and pulled out a small leather notebook, the same one she'd been carrying to family gatherings for as long as I could remember. I'd always thought it was just for grocery lists and phone numbers. Well, let's see, she said, flipping through pages with deliberate slowness. There's the time you told Janet you were working late but Carol saw you at Murphy's bar until 2 in the morning. That was, 17 different occasions over the past year. Rick's phone hand started shaking. That's not. Then there's the matter of your landscaping license, Grandma continued, adjusting her reading glasses. Specifically, how you don't actually have one. Mike looked it up after you mentioned competing for that city contract. Funny thing about operating an unlicensed business while filing taxes as a legitimate contractor. You can't prove anything, Rick said, but his voice had lost all its confidence. Uncle Dave was grinning now, pulling out his own phone. Actually, we can. I've got photos of your truck with Rick's professional landscaping painted on the side, dated from 6 months ago. Want me to send those to the state licensing board? But Grandma wasn't finished. She turned another page in her notebook, humming softly to herself like she was reading a particularly interesting recipe. Oh, and there's this lovely entry from last Christmas, she said. When you claimed that check from your mother was a gift, but Janet found the loan paperwork in your truck. Funny how gifts require monthly payments with interest. Mom's head snapped up. What loan paperwork? The paperwork for the $12,000 loan Rick took from his mother to start his business, Grandma explained helpfully. The loan he told you was a gift so you wouldn't worry about his financial situation when you were considering marriage. I watched Rick's entire world crumble in real time. His recording phone had dropped to his side, forgotten, as he realized the family he'd been threatening had been quietly documenting his lies for years. But my personal favorite, Grandma continued, flipping to another page, is the insurance situation. Carol works for State Farm, you know. Very helpful when we wanted to verify that your business truck is actually registered as a personal vehicle to avoid commercial insurance rates. Amazing how much money you can save when you commit just a tiny bit of fraud. Stop, Rick whispered. Oh, I'm just getting started, Grandma said cheerfully. We haven't even discussed the interesting arrangement you have with that Barrett family whose lawn you've been cutting. The ones who pay you cash because you told them it would be cheaper than going through a real company. The ones who think you're licensed and insured. The ones who don't know that when their sprinkler system broke and flooded their basement, their homeowner's insurance could deny the claim because an unlicensed contractor caused the damage. Rick sank back against the refrigerator like someone had knocked the wind out of him. Dad was staring at Grandma with something approaching awe. How long have you been keeping track of all this? Since the day he joined this family, Grandma replied matter-of-factly. I don't trust men who smile too much and have explanations for everything. Learned that lesson with your grandfather's business partner back in '63. She snapped the notebook shut with a decisive click. So here's what's going to happen, Richard. You're going to delete that recording. You're going to transfer every penny you owe my great-grandson into his account by Monday morning. And then you're going to disappear from our lives forever. And if I don't? Rick asked weakly. Grandma's sweet smile turned absolutely predatory. Then we start making phone calls. The silence that followed Grandma's ultimatum was deafening. Rick stood there like a deflated balloon, his phone hanging limply at his side, while everyone waited to see if he'd finally surrender or make one last desperate move. That's when my phone rang. The ringtone cut through the tension like a fire alarm, and everyone jumped. I looked at the screen and my stomach dropped. It's the police, I announced, staring at the unknown number with a local area code. Rick's eyes went wide. You called the cops. Nobody called the police, Mom said, but she looked as confused as everyone else. I answered the call on speaker, my hands shaking slightly. Hello. Is this the residence where Richard Morrison is staying? The officer's voice was professional but tired. We got a call about a domestic disturbance and possible theft. Everyone turned to stare at Rick, but he looked genuinely shocked. I didn't call anyone, he insisted. Who called? I asked the officer. Anonymous tip came in about 20 minutes ago. Caller said there was shouting about stolen money and potential violence. Are you safe there, son? That's when it hit me, the back door had been open during our entire confrontation. The neighbors could hear everything, and someone had obviously decided things were getting out of hand. We're fine, officer, Mom said, taking the phone from me. This is a family matter. Ma'am, we still need to respond to the call. Can someone meet us outside? Uncle Dave stepped forward. I'll handle this. He headed for the back door, leaving the rest of us in awkward silence. But Rick saw his opening. You know what, he said, suddenly straightening up with renewed confidence. Maybe having the police here is exactly what we need. Let them sort out who's really in the wrong. Rick, don't, Mom warned, but he was already moving toward the door. No, I think this is perfect, Rick continued, his voice getting louder. Let's tell the nice officers about the tax evasion, the unreported income, the threats I've been receiving. Let's see who they think the real criminals are. My heart hammered against my ribs. Even though we had dirt on Rick, involving the police could backfire spectacularly. If he started talking about the cash payments and unreported income, things could spiral way beyond just getting my money back. You're bluffing, Dad said, but I could hear uncertainty in his voice. Am I? Rick was already walking toward the back door. Let's find out. That's when Cousin Sarah, who'd been quietly listening to everything, suddenly spoke up. Actually, Rick, I don't think you want to talk to the police right now. Everyone turned to look at her. She was holding up her phone with a strange expression on her face. What are you talking about? Rick demanded. Sarah held up her screen so we could all see it. It was a text message thread, and my blood went cold as I read the timestamps. I've been texting my boyfriend this whole time, Sarah explained, her voice shaking slightly. You know, my boyfriend Jake Martinez. The one who works for the county assessor's office. Rick's face went pale. So he just texted me back about something very interesting. Sarah's voice was getting stronger now. Apparently, there's already an open investigation into unlicensed contractors in our county. Someone's been filing complaints about people operating without permits. She scrolled through her messages, reading from the screen. And according to Jake, your name came up on their radar 3 weeks ago, Rick. Something about a complaint filed by a former client about damaged property and no insurance coverage. The kitchen went dead silent except for the sound of Uncle Dave's voice drifting in from outside as he talked to the police officers. Rick looked like he'd been hit by a truck. That's not possible. The Barrett family, Sarah continued reading from her phone. Does that name ring a bell? Because apparently they're not very happy about their flooded basement. Or about finding out you're not actually licensed to do the work you charged them for. I watched Rick's last bit of leverage evaporate before my eyes. The police weren't just here about our family argument, they were potentially here about his illegal business practices. And he'd been about to walk outside and introduce himself to them voluntarily. The irony was almost beautiful. The back door opened and Uncle Dave walked in with 2 police officers, a younger woman and an older man who looked like he'd seen everything twice. Behind them, I could see more family members crowding on the back porch, trying to get a glimpse of what was happening. Afternoon, folks, the older officer said, his eyes scanning the crowded kitchen. I'm Officer Martinez, this is Officer Chin. We got a call about a disturbance. Rick stepped forward with what I'm sure he thought was a confident smile, but came across more like a grimace. Officers, I'm glad you're here. There's been a misunderstanding about some business matters, and I think we could use an official perspective. Officer Chin pulled out a small notebook. And you are? Richard Morrison. I run Morrison Landscaping. Rick puffed up slightly as he said it, apparently forgetting everything that had just been revealed about his unlicensed operation. The two officers exchanged a look that made my stomach clench. Morrison Landscaping, Officer Martinez repeated slowly, like he was testing how the words tasted. You wouldn't happen to be the Richard Morrison we've been looking for, would you? The color drained from Rick's face so fast I thought he might pass out. Looking for? County Licensing Office issued a warrant for your arrest yesterday, Officer Chin said matter-of-factly, flipping through her notebook. Unlicensed contracting, insurance fraud, property damage. We were actually planning to visit your registered address tomorrow. There must be some mistake, Rick stammered, but his voice had gone up an octave. Officer Martinez was already reaching for his handcuffs. Richard Morrison, 42 years old, operates landscaping business out of a blue Ford pickup. This is harassment, Rick said desperately, backing toward the sink. These people called you here to intimidate me because of a family dispute. Actually, Officer Chin said, we've been looking for you for 3 days. The domestic disturbance call just helped us locate you. That's when things got really interesting, because Rick did something none of us expected. He bolted. Rick shoved past Aunt Linda, knocked over a chair, and sprinted for the front door like his life depended on it. The problem was, the house was packed with my relatives, and Rick had never been particularly athletic to begin with. He made it exactly as far as the living room before Cousin Mike, who'd played football in high school, tackled him into the coffee table. The crash was spectacular. Grandma's ceramic figurines went flying, the coffee table collapsed, and Rick ended up face down on the carpet with Mike sitting on his back while he wheezed about police brutality. Well, that was stupid, Officer Martinez observed, walking calmly into the living room where Rick was now being held down by 3 of my cousins who'd apparently been waiting their whole lives for an excuse to tackle someone. Officer Chen was trying not to smile as she pulled out her handcuffs. Richard Morrison, you're under arrest for unlicensed contracting, insurance fraud, and now resisting arrest. This is all a setup. Rick shouted into the carpet. Ask them about the tax evasion. Ask them about the unreported income. Sir, you have the right to remain silent, Officer Martinez began, but Rick wasn't done. The kid's been working under the table all summer. $6,000 in unreported income. They're all criminals. Officer Chen paused in her Miranda rights recitation. Sir, are you confessing to paying someone under the table while operating an unlicensed business? The living room went dead silent as everyone realized Rick had just implicated himself in even more crimes while trying to throw us under the bus. That's not. Rick's voice trailed off as he apparently realized what he'd just done. Because tax evasion and improper employment practices would be additional charges, Officer Chen continued helpfully. Rick's muffled groan from the carpet pretty much summed up how his day was going. As the police led Rick away in handcuffs, still ranting about tax evasion and family conspiracies, the living room felt like the aftermath of a tornado. Broken figurines littered the floor, the coffee table was in pieces, and my entire extended family stood around looking shell-shocked by what they'd just witnessed. Well, Grandpa said, settling back into his recliner like nothing had happened, this has been the most interesting family reunion we've had in years. That broke the tension, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. Cousins were rehashing Rick's tackle, aunts were sweeping up ceramic pieces, and Uncle Dave was already on the phone with someone, probably spreading the news to relatives who'd missed the show. But I noticed Mom standing by the window, watching the police car disappear down the street, her face unreadable. Mom. I walked over to her, suddenly feeling awkward. Are you okay? She turned to look at me, and I was surprised to see tears in her eyes. But she was smiling too, which was confusing. I'm so sorry, she said, pulling me into a fierce hug. I'm sorry I didn't see what he was doing. I'm sorry I trusted him with your future. I'm sorry I let him manipulate both of us. It's not your fault, I said, even though part of me had been angry at her for not knowing. He fooled everyone. Not everyone, she said, glancing over at Grandma, who was directing the living room cleanup like a general commanding troops. Your grandmother saw right through him from day one. Officer Chen appeared in the doorway, having finished loading Rick into the patrol car. We'll need statements from everyone involved, but it can wait until tomorrow. The district attorney will probably want to talk to you about the wage theft as well, that's a separate criminal charge from the licensing issues. What happens now? I asked. Well, his truck and equipment will be impounded as evidence. There'll be a court case. And you'll probably want to file a civil suit to recover the money he owes you. She handed Mom a business card. The DA's Victim Services Office can help with that. After the police left, the family reunion slowly returned to something resembling normal. Someone had salvaged the desserts from the kitchen, and we all ended up on the back porch, eating pie and processing what had just happened. So, Jake asked, does this mean I'm not getting that $15 an hour job? The laughter that erupted was exactly what we all needed. Dad came over and sat beside me on the porch steps. You handled that like a man, he said quietly. Standing up for yourself, fighting back when he tried to destroy you. I'm proud of you. Coming from him, those words meant more than I expected. Thanks, Dad. And hey, he added with a grin, if you need summer work next year, my construction crew could use someone who's not afraid of hard work. 15 an hour, legitimate payroll, no games. 3 weeks later, I got a call from the DA's office. Rick had pleaded guilty to everything, the licensing violations, the wage theft, the tax evasion he'd accidentally confessed to while being arrested. He was facing 2 years in prison and owed me $3,847 in restitution, including penalties. More importantly, his boat was being sold to pay his victims back. I started my freshman year of college that fall with a bank account that was healthier than I'd ever imagined, a family that was closer than ever, and a story that became legendary at every subsequent family reunion. And I never had to see Rick Morrison again. The petty revenge had turned into something much bigger, justice served with a side of poetic irony, delivered by a 78-year-old grandmother with a notebook in a family that knew how to stick together when it mattered most.